For years, the EU countries have been struggling to find a solution for the distribution of refugees, so far in vain. Now, they have probably agreed on a new principle that will punish refusers financially. EU countries that do not want to take in immigrants should have to pay for them in the future. Those who do not want to take in refugees are obliged to make a large financial contribution, said French Interior Minister Gérald Darmanin after an informal meeting of EU interior ministers in Lille in France on Thursday. The participants agreed unanimously on this principle, he said. However, numerous details still have to be clarified, in particular the distribution key and the amount of the financial participation. He assumes that many countries will take part in taking in the migrants, said Darmanin. The model is the Valletta Agreement, in which several states agreed on an orderly distribution of boat people for the first time in 2019. In contrast, the inclusion of financial participation should be mandatory in the future. At the same time, migrants are to be registered more comprehensively after their arrival and filtered with a view to their asylum prospects. If things happen at the EU's external border as we envision, the migratory pressure will decrease, said Darmanin. Among other things, France is committed to registering migrants with photos and biometric data and linking databases. But many details are still open. Does that mean that we are holding people at the border? How long and under what conditions, Darmanin said. Well, these issues should be discussed at the EU summit in March. There is sharp criticism from Turkey. President Recep Tayyip Erdogan lacks a real leader in the current crises in Europe. From his point of view, Olaf Scholz obviously cannot hold a candle to his predecessor, as we would say in Germany. After his visit to Kiev, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan accused the West of lacking leadership in resolving the Ukraine conflict. Earlier, ex-Chancellor Angela Merkel arrived and held the key to solving the problem. There is no such leader at the moment, Erdogan said, according to a report by the state news agency Anadolu on Friday. Unfortunately, the West has so far failed to make anything like a contribution to solving the conflict. I can only say that they cause problems, said Erdogan. US President Joe Biden has not yet shown a positive approach either. Erdogan has offered to mediate between Russia and Ukraine. While Kiev accepted the offer, the reaction from Moscow was cautious. However, there is said to be a bilateral meeting between Erdogan and Russian President Vladimir Putin. An exact date has not yet been set. He attaches great importance to the meeting with Putin, Erdogan said. Should Turkey be given the role of mediator after meeting the task would be happily attempted. The Prime Minister of the country is also affected by the measure, and above all, the USA and France criticized the interim government for being too close to Russia. And you will see what we are talking about. The European Union has decided to impose sanctions on 5 members of the junta for obstructing or undermining the political transition process in Mali. The punitive measures are aimed, among other things, at the Prime Minister of the interim government, Choguel Kokala Maiga, as the EU announced on Friday. He and the other 4 representatives of the junta are therefore denied entry into and also transit through the EU. In addition, their assets were frozen. There have been 2 military coups in Mali in the past 2 years. In August 2020, the military led by Colonel Assimi Goïta overthrew then-President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta. In May 2021, the military junta staged another coup. Goïta deposed the civilian head of an interim government and appointed himself interim president. Both coups were sharply criticized internationally. In addition to Maiga, 2 other close confidants of junta leader Goïta are on the EU sanctions list that has now been published. Malik Dia and Ismail Vague are believed to have instigated the coup d'etat in August 2020, according to EU information. Minister Ibrahim Mikasa Maiga and junta member Adama Ben Diara are also accused of playing a key role in the coup. All 5 were sanctioned by the Economic Community of West Africa, ECOWAS, in January, after the junta announced it would postpone elections scheduled for February by several years. After France's criticism of the cancellation of the elections, the military junta expelled the French ambassador from the country last week's Monday. The French government then announced that it intended to discuss the future military presence in the West African country with its European partners by mid-February. France currently has more than 4,000 soldiers deployed in the Sahel zone, more than half of them in Mali. By 2023, their number is to be reduced to 2,500 to 3,000. And the German Bundeswehr is involved in Mali with up to 1,700 soldiers in a UN and an EU training mission. German Federal Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock questioned the deployment of the Bundeswehr in Mali on Wednesday. She says, "In view of the recent steps taken by the Malian government, we honestly have to ask ourselves whether the conditions for the success of our joint commitment are still in place." The rulers in Mali are also accused of working increasingly closely with Russian so-called military advisors. I call them mercenaries. France and the United States, among others, have accused the junta of allowing themselves to be supported by Russian mercenaries from the so-called Wagner Group under the guise of fighting terrorism. Due to the milder course of the disease in Omicron infections and high vaccination rates, the Swedish government and the the health authority decided to abolish most of the corona measures on February 9th. "It is time to reopen Sweden," said Prime Minister Magdalena Andersson at the announcement in Stockholm. Denmark had previously lifted practically all restrictions in the country, and shortly afterwards Norway had relaxed them significantly. The fact that the Swedish restrictions are falling means, among other things, that upper limits for participants will disappear, and restrictions in restaurants, pubs and cafes will also be lifted. The advice to wear mouth and nose protection in crowds on public transport is also no longer applicable. However, some recommendations for the unvaccinated remain. In order to protect the most vulnerable, it is also important to maintain risk-reducing measures in health and in nursing care and in retirement homes, the health authorities said. The pandemic is not over, but it is entering a whole new phase, Andersson said. Several international studies have shown that Omicron infections result in milder disease progression. Despite the high number of new infections, the number of intensive care patients remains stable. The vaccination numbers are also high, and taken together, this means a new situation, said the head of government. However, the fact that the restrictions are being lifted does not mean that COVID-19 will simply disappear from society, and emphasize I will never be able to say that word, the director of the health authority, Karin Tekmark-Wissel. The most important measure is still to get vaccinated. And with this video, I once again learned I really have to learn to pronounce Swedish words. That is almost as hard as, the writings in Wales or in Cardiff or whatever. And I'll see you in my next video. Bis gleich.